This episode focuses on the top 10 westerns of all time, even though we're dismissing the entire back catalogue of John Wayne. We're looking for films that either acknowledge the grim nuance of the time, or aim a knowing wink at the clichés they're paying homage to. We cannot indulge worlds where cowboys are good, Native Americans are bad, impossibly accurate shots kill instantly while the hero only ever suffers a shoulder wound. Clothes have been freshly ironed, sets have more artificial lighting running through them than Vegas at Christmas, and love interests could be mistaken for granddaughters, all in an effort to whitewash the slaughter of an entire people. We want troubled minds doing unspeakable acts in clothes they haven't peeled off in a month, which is why we're starting with City Slickers. Only joking. That's in the top 5. Tombstone emerged in 1993 and was given the Hollywood action treatment. Big names in Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer played Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday respectively. Legends of one age being played by legends of another, allowing for a little bit of poetic license. And why stop there with the infamy, as the entire plot revolves around the gunfight at the OK Corral. With such pulling power, it's amazing they even bothered with the script and didn't just let everybody drink tequila before flopping them on a horse and seeing who started a fight first. But they did, and it isn't offensive. If you want a western where you know who you're rooting for, without raising too many questions, while still acknowledging the problems of the time, Tombstone's a pleasant way to spend a couple of hours without having to apologise to anybody afterwards. I think we've all reached the point with Quentin Tarantino where we can agree he should have signed off with Pulp Fiction, or done less interviews. But he does still occasionally throw together a decent film, and Django Unchained is certainly that. If Tombstone was Hollywood's effort at the western, then this is quintessential Quentin. You won't be surprised, you won't learn anything new about his view on the world, you'll see pretty much every face you'd expect to, but if you can switch off his voice in your head for long enough to get through it, it's worth a watch. Ever since The Big Lebowski came out, it's difficult to imagine Jeff Bridges is anybody but the dude who gave up on finding his rug and became an actor. And as he mumbles his way through this remake of the 60s classic, you can be forgiven for thinking he spends the whole time trying to work out where he left his shoes, whilst bedlam erupts around him. But with the Coen brothers' usual sprinkle of atmospheric magic and a cast of top actors who have a history of choosing their projects by a quality over payout, the end result is a western worthy of any fan of the genre. Back in the distant days of 1995, Sam Raimi turned his hand to the western and delivered everything you'd expect from one of his films. Gunfights from the bullet's perspective, characters with unnecessary oddities, dark humour, and bad guys you slowly start to perceive as the hero. He also does away with 80% of the usual story and focuses solely on the bit everybody is waiting for, the gunslinger's duel. Based around a quick draw contest, the film is littered with fights between contestants with unknown grudges and hidden motivations to win. Many involving Gene Hackman's impressively unlikable Kingpin character and his past life as an outlaw. Russell Crowe plays an equal rogue, looking to make up for his past with a vow of pacifism. Gene Hackman holds him as a prisoner and forces him to fight in a test of his resolve. There's even room for Sharon Stone to enter the competition, rather than play the usual role reserved for females of such times, either on her back or as the wise madams who's looking to do her time in the brothel business and retire. So why not suspend your cynicism for a few hours and let a master of his craft indulge you in his world? Russell Crowe appears again, which probably isn't that big a surprise considering his reputation for drinking and brawling when off-screen. But most people don't associate him with westerns, and yet here he is. This time he plays the villain with glimpses of a soft heart, as Christine Bale agrees to deliver him to the 310 to Yuma and ultimately justice at the hands of the law. Problem is, Christine Bale is just a farmer who needs the money, and Crowe's notorious ganger in hot pursuit. If that doesn't tickle even the slightest glimmer of intrigue, then I'm shocked you made it to number 6. Just skip to number 1 and satisfy your curiosity. You're clearly not a fan of the genre. I imagine Robert Ford was expecting an altogether more heroic legacy than the one he receives in this movie. But we all know films are 100% accurate, so we'll join the pile on rather than raise any sensible doubts or concerns. A film with a title longer than most reviews, a strong cast is headed by Brad Pitt and Casey Affleck. And although many of the standard Western cliches are present, this film focuses more on the two men at the heart of the tale and their relationship, as Robert Ford goes from worshipper to resenter and eventually murderer. If that comes as a spoiler, we suggest you pay more attention to titles. Focusing more on the mental battles than those with guns in dusty streets, it's a thoughtful piece that delves into the psyche and reality of having a name that makes you a living legend, rather than using your moniker to wind up drunken oafs before making them cower in terror. A Sunday afternoon watch rather than a Saturday night. Luckily for me, I watched Unforgiven before Clint Eastwood revealed he wouldn't mind still being allowed to run around with a gun shooting people he doesn't agree with. But as a child of the 80s, I've learned to disassociate my childhood heroes with memories they gave me, the ones strictly through the television screen and not in person. Meaning this film still holds a precious place in my heart as the first Western I truly embraced. A retired monster who has been sedated by the love of his wife, her death had left him to bring up their children alone, and when the offer of one last payout emerges, his initial reticence fades away through the course of the movie, until a final scene where his old persona returns in full flow. Gene Hackman plays his eventual nemesis and once more performs admirably as the man in charge of the town where the drama unfolds. Is Clint's character, William Money, good? Is he bad? Does he know? Does he care? I'm certainly not going to be the one to judge him. The man's a cold-hearted lunatic. After making the greatest Western trilogy of all time, Sergio Leone sat back and used everything he'd learned to make a standalone epic. I would talk about the man a lot more, but we're getting close to number one, and I imagine it won't be a surprise when we get there. There's always room in any list for those that make an entertaining film that just happens to be of a genre, but could have been set in any time or place and still be fun to watch. The Western is no different, but perhaps the king of these efforts is Blazing Saddles. Now, we know the scripts would never be written today due to the highly inappropriate language, but when it was made, that same language was used only to denigrate black people. Blazing Saddle turns its fire firmly on racism throughout the movie, showing the socially accepted offence of the time through the eyes of the main character, who plays up to the stereotypes whilst winking at the camera to point out how moronic the people hurling such nonsense are. It's also Mel Brooks' silly humour at its finest, with some classic scenes that will tickle laughter from your throats for years after watching. We guarantee you'll never be able to eat beans around a campfire in quite the same way again. When Sergio Leone set out to make his trilogy of westerns, he may never have realised he was defining the genre with each passing scene. Or maybe he did, but I'd never assumed such an ego of a true genius. Before Leone, westerns were just another vehicle for the Hollywood hero of the time. Post-Leone, the film was the star that became the vehicle for those within it. Fistful of Dollars was Clint Eastwood's first leading role, a role only secured because everybody else had balked at the wage. But once it hit the theatres, John Wayne's time as the definitive cowboy was over, as, ironically, a new cowboy rode into town and saw him off. Sergio Leone didn't just acknowledge the filth and danger of the time, he made it part of the charm. The landscape became an extra character, and Ennio Morricone's soundtrack is probably more famous than the film. Good guys had pretty ropey morals, and the plot didn't revolve around defeating the local tribe of Native Americans. In fact, the storylines deal more with the politics of the Founding Fathers and their inherent greed than kick a race that had already been slaughtered. If you've ever liked a Western, then this trilogy is probably why. The good, the bad and the ugly is the crowning achievement of the trio,